Borders are the lines drawn on maps separating countries, yet they mean so much more than just mere boundaries. Sometimes they can be interesting expressions of history, politics, culture, and geography. Some borders between countries are simple and straight, but there are those that are just weird and unique to almost defy logic. These can come in the form of remnants of old treaties, the result of wars, or even quirks of geography that have remained for centuries. In this video today, we will take a look at some of the most unusual, mind-blowing, and strangest country borders around the world. Borders from Europe through to Africa and the Americas tell stories of complex political decisions and human interactions. Some borders barely make sense, considering how weird or strangely shaped they may be, while others manifest deep cultural divides. For all their oddity, these borders function in governing the movement of people and goods across them, as well as ideas. Let's take a closer look at some of the most interesting and weird country borders, starting with a European town that falls between two nations in a way that defies simplicity. Number 1. Enclave of BarlHertog and BarlNederland. The most complicated and intriguing border in the world can be found in the town of BarlHertog in Belgium and BarlNederland in the Netherlands. But this town is an absolute enigma where borders are concerned, as there are over 20 small pockets or enclaves of Belgium on Dutch territory. A number of these even contain smaller Dutch enclaves within them. It's just a patchwork from the aspect of land ownership, pieces of Belgium and the Netherlands throughout in such a confusing mix. Such is the anomaly of the case that there are houses where half of it falls in Belgium, while half of it lies in the Netherlands. Imagine you stay in a house where your front door is in one country and your back door opens to another. This strange situation has its roots in medieval times when the ownership of land was less institutionalized. The local lords and noblemen would come to some form of agreement regarding land, which afterwards would grow into part of treaties and borders. Some enclaves form rather strange patterns. BarlHertog and BarlNederland are two towns that represent a century-long history of complex land deals and territorial claims. This peculiar setup affects people's day-to-day life in town. Businesses, for example, sometimes have to follow the laws of both Belgium and the Netherlands. Perhaps a cafe in Barl serves Belgian beer on one side of the room and Dutch snacks on the other because it operates under different rules depending on which side of the border the customer is sitting. Even something as prosaic as taxes and postal addresses can get quite complicated. One famous example includes a house having two addresses, one Belgian, one Dutch end, because the front door and back door were located in different countries. The residents, however, it has all become nothing out of the ordinary, and they have learned to live with the more unusual aspects of dwelling in a divided town. Number 2. Pirin and Portoroz split. The narrow stretch of land defining the border between Slovenia and Croatia runs from Pirin in Slovenia to Portoroz in Croatia, with a mere 100 meters of border at its point of narrowness. This thin strip of land, which divides two countries running along the bays of Pirin and Trieste, thus gives a tight border that has always been in dispute between the two nations. The question of the border between Slovenia and Croatia has been an issue for decades. After the breakup of former Yugoslavia in the early 1990s, both countries became independent, but where exactly the border between the two lies was never always crystal clear. The dispute over the maritime boundary in the Bay of Pirin was one point of contention. Both Slovenia and Croatia have claimed the rights to these waters, leading to diplomatic tensions and arguments over fishing rights in territorial waters. An international agreement, called the Arbitration Agreement, signed in 2017, was supposed to sort out the problem, but there are still disagreements. This dispute is lived with by the citizens of Pirin and Portoroz. Though the area is peaceful, the politics of the border are never very far from the surface. Despite the political tensions, Pirin and Portoroz are in the immediate vicinity of rich cultural heritage and of great historical importance. Since both towns are tourist destinations, they have beautiful coastlines and aspects of Mediterranean architecture and seafood delicacies. The narrow border separating them makes it even more charming, as tourists can get a glimpse of both cultures within the small area of both Slovenia and Croatia. Many tourists in the area are amazed by how something so small can have so much significance. The combination of cultural influences on both sides of the border makes for lively and vibrant towns that are truly fascinating to explore. Number 3. The case of the Nicosia buffer zone. The capital of Cyprus, Nicosia, enjoys the dubious distinction of being one of the last divided capitals in the world. This city is divided by the internationally recognized Republic of Cyprus and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized only by Turkey. This division marks the Green Line, a United Nations buffer zone that runs through the center of the city. The division of Cyprus traces back to 1974, when a Greek Cypriot coup aimed at union with Greece was followed by a Turkish invasion. The aftermath of this was the splitting of the island into the south belonging to Greek Cypriots and the north to Turkish Cypriots. In an effort to ward off more bloodshed, The United Nations intervened by creating a buffer strip between them, the Green Line. This buffer zone has, for nearly 50 years, been patrolled by UN peacekeepers as a means of maintaining a peace accord. The people of Nicosia live in a way that acknowledges an internally divided city. The Green Line cuts through families, quarters, and businesses. While parts of the town have been abandoned since the conflict took place, other quarters are finding new life as enclaves for culture and the arts. The division also gave the people of Nicosia a strange situation where many people look at the border as a means for conflict and separation, while others also see it as a point of resilience and finally reunification. In the last few years, there has been a rise in bridging this divide through cross-border cooperation and cultural exchange programs that allow for the understanding of both communities. The India-Bangladesh border is one of the most intricate borders anywhere in the world. It is characterized by a number of peculiar enclaves, popularly known as Chitmahal, small pieces of Bangladeshi land wholly enclosed by Indian territory and vice versa. In all, there were over 100 such enclaves before the border was finally settled in 2015. Perhaps the most renowned among them is Dahagram Angarpota, an Indian enclave completely enclosed within Bangladesh. These first emerged in the 1947 partition of British India into the countries of India and Pakistan. What is now Bangladesh was East Pakistan. Partition left behind a messy kettle of borders, counter-enclaves, and enclaves galore in every direction. As time went on, this territorial patchwork turned out to be nothing but a source of confusion and hardship for people living in these enclaves. A historic pact was signed between India and Bangladesh in 2015 to exchange the enclaves and simplify the border. However, even as the agreement has somewhat resolved the border issue, the repercussions of the enclaves continue to impact the lives of the people residing in this region. For the people living in these enclaves, life can be hard. Many enclaves were cut off from the land in which they lay, having poor access to some of the services, such as healthcare and education. Some ended up finding themselves in a situation whereby they literally had no country, since one might be a citizen of an enclave, yet not recognized by the surrounding country. Yet amidst all this, individual identities have been taking shape among the people of the enclaves, mingling Indian and Bangladeshi culture. Life has improved for many enclave residents since the 2015 agreement, with better access to services and clearer governance. If you want more of this kind of content, be sure to like the video and subscribe. Enable that bell notification feature to keep updated with new video releases. Number 5. Lesotho's quirky borders. Lesotho is a small, landlocked country that is completely surrounded by the Republic of South Africa, making it one of the very few countries in the world which exist entirely as an enclave within another country. Given this, its history, culture, and economy have been molded by such an environment in many ways. Among these, Kwakwa homeland area for the Basotho people is located within the territory of the Republic of South Africa and has wide attachment to Lesotho. The present borders of Lesotho were demarcated during the time Britain was ruling the region. Largely a kingdom of the Basotho was able to keep its sovereignty from the scramble for Africa and avoid being completely annexed by the British colonies that turned into South Africa. The mere fact of the formation of Lesotho as an enclave has involved a situation whereby, while the country is independent, it is highly dependent on South Africa in terms of trade, employment, and resources. The historical relationship of the two nations has been a mix of cooperation and tension, especially regarding border controls and movements across the two areas. Completely surrounded by South Africa, Lesotho also both benefits and suffers. Relatively speaking, it is easy to trade with its neighbor, utilizing the infrastructure provided in South Africa. In fact, many Basotho people work in South African mines or cities and send their remittances home to their Lesotho families. However, Lesotho isn't economic dependent. The border complicates immigration, security, and economic policies. For example, there has been illegal immigration over the years as Basotho citizens try to seek better opportunities from the South African government. Moreover, control of the border sometimes sees goods and services delayed amidst bureaucracy. Contrary to these prospects, there is something culturally unique to Lesotho that sets it intrinsically apart from its much larger neighbor. The Basotho have their own language, culture, and traditional pattern of life which they fight tooth and nail against even the challenges brought forth by modern times. Number 6. The peculiar case of the BarlTederland Triangle. Equally remarkable, though a good deal smaller, is the BarlTederland Triangle, 2,060 square kilometers sandwiched between Egypt and Sudan. What is atypical of BarlTederland is that neither Egypt nor Sudan claim the strip as its own, one of the very few examples in the world of terra nullius or land belonging to no one. The BarlTederland dispute goes back to 1899 when both Egypt and Sudan were under the British. For the first time, the border separating the two territories was drawn in such a way that it left BarlTederland under Egyptian control and another area, the Halab Triangle, under Sudanese control. A new border, however, was drawn in 1902, which switched the control of these two regions, with BarlTog fallen under the Sudanese control while Halab Triangle fell under Egyptian control. Whereas Egypt and Sudan both claim the more resource-rich Halab Triangle that would leave BarlTog in legal limbo. Due to this fact, there are no permanent residents within BarlTog, and it remains one of a few sites around the world where there is no national government to speak of. Over the years, several people have attempted to claim it as their personal kingdom. None of these claims have been recognized internationally thus far. It attracted the attention of adventurers, environmentalists, and even internet personalities who have attempted to declare it a new country. In 2014, an American man traveled to the region and planted a flag declaring the Kingdom of North Sudan to make his daughter a princess. These are often done in a very humorous or ironic way, yet they represent the odd and fascinating status that BarlTog holds in today's world, unclaimed ground where every other patch of ground belongs to someone. This, along with the deserts and its remote nature, means BarlTog will probably never be a populated or contested region. It nonetheless represents an interesting example of how borders, which usually define who owns a given piece of land, can sometimes put land into limbo. Number 7. The strange border between the United States and Canada. The border between the United States and Canada is the longest in the world, stretching over 8,891 kilometers. Whereas much of this border is quite regular in its demarcation, there are a few interesting anomalies to it which reflect oddities in several locations. Two examples in this regard include Point Roberts, an American enclave to the south of Vancouver, and the Alaska Panhandle, creating a very unusual boundary in the far northwest. Point Roberts is a small peninsula of land jutting out at the southernmost edge of Canada's Vancouver region. However, it does not form any part of it due to its connection with the United States. It was a jumbled border that transpired from a situation concerning the Treaty of Oregon in 1846, which stated the 49th parallel would be the border separating the United States and British North America. The problem is that the 49th parallel cuts right through Point Roberts, leaving this small American territory quite separated from the rest of the country. For the residents of Point Roberts, daily life is a little bit different from the average American town. The residents have to drive through Canada just to get to the rest of the United States. To many residents, this entails dealing with customs and immigration every time one wants to go on to the mainland. Despite such an inconvenience, Point Roberts has its appeal. The isolation of the town creates a peaceful community, and it has been a popular spot for Canadian vacation homes. The Alaska Panhandle is another quirky region of the U.S.-Canada border. It is a narrow strip of land that extends far down the west coast of Canada and separates British Columbia from the Pacific Ocean. The Panhandle features much of Alaska's most spectacular scenery, the towns of Juneau and Sitka, and uncounted fjords, mountains, and islands. In the late 19th century, a controversy arose over the boundary of Alaska and Canada, following the discovery of gold in the area. The United States and Canada both wanted control of lucrative trade routes, leading to the Klondike Gold Rush. The issue was later solved in 1903, with the United States gaining control of the Panhandle. Tensions between the two countries were to remain for years thereafter. Today, this Panhandle of Alaska serves as a hotbed for tourism and trade. The border is nevertheless relevant today for reasons of economy, but lost its contentious significance. It no longer bears the same relevance it once had. At number 8, we have the unique borders of Europe's microstates. In Europe, there is a fair number of microstates, very small in population and even smaller in size. Probably the most well-known examples include San Marino, Monaco, and Liechtenstein. What makes them interesting is the fact that, apart from the minuscule size, the borders have marked centuries of historical and cultural growth. Despite their very small sizes, these microstates have remained independent and preserved their identities, making their borders unique and symbolic. San Marino. San Marino is one of the oldest republics in the world, completely surrounded by Italy. Its borders are drawn through the rolling hills of the Italian countryside, making its landscape quite picturesque. This small but somewhat large country carries a rich history from its founding in 301 AD and has its borders intact for several centuries of European conflict. Monaco. The French Riviera boasts one of the world's shortest borders. Monaco, bordering a length of only 5.5 kilometers. The general belief concerning Monaco includes that it is a state full of luxury casinos and a haven for rich people where no taxes are levied. Although Monaco is surrounded by France on all sides, its cultural and political identity remains very different. Because the border separating Monaco from France is so short, movement between the two countries is very easy, and it draws much attention from tourists. Liechtenstein. The state of Liechtenstein borders Switzerland and Austria, and though small, its border with the two countries is very important. The border separating Liechtenstein from Switzerland symbolizes the very close relationship they have with each other culturally and economically. They form one customs union, use one currency, and speak the same language, a factor that makes them even less different from one another. Many of the weird borders around Africa are usually based on decisions made during the colonial era that had little to no regard for culture and geography. One of the most exciting examples is that situated between Zambia and Zimbabwe at the famous Victoria Falls, where one of the most spectacular natural wonders in the world has the border running through it. The Zambezi River creates the boundary between Zambia and Zimbabwe. Right through the middle of Victoria Falls, one of the biggest and most famous waterfalls in the world. It divides the falls into two parts, shared between the two countries and demarcated by the border, which divides the Zambian side from the Zimbabwean side. Visitors to the area can stand on both countries at once while taking in sensational views of the falls and the surrounding rainforest. Owing to the peculiar placing of the falls, the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe has become a symbol of cooperation and common heritage. It was due to mutual consideration between both countries for preserving the falls as a UNESCO World Heritage Site that makes this zone one of the most attractive tourist areas, hosting visitors from every corner of the world. The world's short and strange country boundaries are a window to the complex history, culture, and geography of our planet. From the odd enclaves of BarlHertog and BarlNederland to the bizarre BarlTall Triangle, these borders, in their various ways, reflect the complicated stories lying behind national borders. A reminder that not all boundaries are simple, but instead are carved out from centuries of political maneuvering, conflict, and cooperation. As long as globalization continues to blur national lines, the relevance of these quirky borders becomes lessened, but the stories will persist to beguile us, a reflection of how the world's nations came into being and have been transformed through the passage of time. These borders, though unusual at times, speak to cultural identity, geopolitical strategy, and human ingenuity in the territorial carve-up for particular peoples and nations. Whereas borders have been much considered dividing lines between us, examples under spotlight will demonstrate that few of them may connect the community and even foster cooperation and understanding. Often enough, weird and short borders are not just places of separation, but sites of interaction where cultures, languages, and customs meet. The role of national borders in this increasingly border-crossing world is far from traditional. National borders, sometimes, depending on the certain region, become highly fluid, where countries are based on unions, trade agreements, or other partnerships that would enable people and goods to cross borders with the same ease. The European Union, for example, has squashed most internal borders between its member states, making travel and commerce very easy. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, borders are increasingly becoming politicized. Land and resource disputes and claims of sovereignty, in opposition to the legal status quo, continue to arise. For example, the U.S.-Mexico border epitomizes one of the most complex relationships between security, immigration, and trade. These strange, short borders discussed in this exploration have shown that borders are human history, culture, and geography. We need to remember, as we forge ahead through the challenges of this globalized world, that borders, no matter how bizarre, are ultimately about people who live, work, and thrive in these unique spaces. From the enclaves of BarlHertog and BarlNederland to the unclaimed BarlTall Triangle, the world is full of fascinating borders that, in reality, break down conventional ideas of what a border should be. These odd boundaries tell stories of colonialism, diplomacy, cultural diversity, and the continuing human quest to define and control land. Be a traveler, historian, or just curious about everything that has to do with the world, all kinds of intrigue are found along these borders. They remind us that even while borders can divide, they also can bring us together in so many surprising ways. And as the world keeps on evolving, these borders will, too, carrying with them the considerable histories and cultures of the nations they separate and the people they unite. After all, borders are not just lines drawn on maps, but are the lively embodiment of one word: change, which more or less characterizes our world. To understand their stories is to add enormous depth not only to our knowledge of geography, but also to that of human civilization in general. Thank you for watching. We will appreciate your thoughts in the comments section. Do well to like, subscribe, and give this video the widest publicity. See you next time.